This video is about if statements. An if statement will let your program do different things depending on the result of a yes or no question, or depending on the result of a test. So for example, here I'm opening a pop-up window and asking, what's my middle name? And whatever the user types gets saved here inside answer. I want to test if they got my middle name right. So if they got it right, I want to print yes. And if they didn't get right, I want to print no. So you can use an if statement for this. The general way an if statement always looks is you have the word if, and then inside parentheses, you have the yes or no question. So for me, the question is something like, is their answer Carl? Because that's my middle name. So if their answer is Carl, then I want to print yes. And if their answer isn't Carl, I want to say no. At the end of the question, which is inside the parentheses, you need an opening curly brace and a closing curly brace. That's called a block of code. And all the lines between the opening and the closing are the lines of Java that are going to run if the answer to the question inside the parentheses is yes. So in other words, it will only run this line of code if this question was yes. So let's look at how this looks in actual Java. In actual Java, I'll say if answer, because that's what they typed as the answer, dot equals Carl. And then I have my opening curly brace and my closing curly brace. And I'll type, you got it. So let's see what this means by looking at what I just said. So we've got the if statement. Inside the parentheses, this is the question I'm asking. I'm asking, is the value inside answer equal to this word Carl? You can ask different kinds of questions in here. If it was a number, I could say, is the number larger than 10? Or if I wanted to check if the number was equal to something, I could say, is the number equal to 10? So there's a lot of different questions that you can ask. And we'll go through those in a second. But if I want to ask a question about whether text is equal to something, this is how you ask, is text equal to something? And then inside the curly braces, I have a line of code that says you got it. You can have as many lines of code between the curly braces as you want. So I could say, you got it. My name is Carl. And if you wanted to, you could even ask another question inside the curly braces. I'm not going to show what that looks like, but that's the example. I'm going to show you something else that you can do at the end of an if statement. You don't have to, but if you want to, right after that closing brace, you can type the word else and then have another opening and closing brace. What the word else means is it means something like otherwise. So here I'm saying, if their answer was Carl, then do this. Otherwise, if it's not Carl, then do this. Another way of thinking about what else means is if not. So this line of code runs if answer equals Carl. This line of code runs if it's not true that answer equals Carl. So only one of these two lines of code is ever going to run. The way the computer will run this code is it will look inside answer and it will say, is the answer equal to Carl? And if the answer is yes, it runs this line of code. And then when it gets to the closing brace, it will jump down here. It's going to skip all of that. But if the answer isn't Carl, if this thing inside the if statement isn't true, then it's going to skip this line of code and it will jump to the else. And it will just run that one.